Welcome to the Music Nut Program. I'm John. Thank you so much for joining me today for my top 10 favorite albums from 1970. This is a list of someone who grew up on classic rock radio right after he was a heavy metal kid, and these songs became a part of my fabric, and I carry these songs in me to this day. I picked from a list of about 30 albums to get down to my top 10, and I can tell you I own at least another 50 or 60 that were released in 1970. But these 10 are the ones that I still get that same feeling from hearing them as I had when I first bought them. And a lot of these albums I bought in the late 80s, early 90s. Some of these were some of the first CDs I ever bought. So here we go. Number 10. Now, this album I got a little bit later, but I knew of this album when I was a teenager. It's Emerson, Lake and Palmer's self-titled debut. Now, the most popular song on here is Lucky Man, the wonderful ballad that Greg Lake sings on. And he wrote that song when he was 12 years old. And Keith Emerson put a synthesizer solo at the end. But that really is an outlier. The rest of this album is very progressive and heavy at times. Knife Edge is very heavy. The Barbarian is this killer instrumental. Take a Pebble is a musical tour de force. My favorite song by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Tank, showcase for Carl Palmer is excellent. The Three Fates, showcase for Keith Emerson. Everything on here is very good. Yes, it's a lot of people might think this is bombastic, but it depends on what you like. I love this album. I don't love everything Emerson, Lake and Palmer did, but this is my favorite by this trio, and that is my number 10, Emerson, Lake and Palmer's self-titled debut. Number 9 is an album I've loved it for a few decades now, and I believe it was the second album I bought by them. The first one was their debut, Chicago 2. Now, this album is probably endured as maybe their most popular, along with Chicago Transit Authority, because Make Me Smile, 25 or 6 to 4, Color My World, all very different songs, were huge hit singles. And you still hear them to this day, but this album has legs. The Road is awesome. In the Country, Wake Up Sunshine, fantastic. Color My World and Make Me Smile were from the Ballet for a Girl in Buchanan suite. The whole suite is wonderful. And the suite at the end of the album, It Better End Soon, is also pretty strong. Everything on here is wonderful. You get a large variety of different genres on here and textures. This is my number 9, Chicago 2. Number 8, a CD I bought when I was in high school. And this is an album I really got introduced to listening to Rock 107. A lot of these were like that, really, but I was listening to like a album show. Maybe it was Rockline or something like that, but that got me into this album, along with Rock 107 playing a lot of the tracks off it. It's Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young's Deja Vu. Now, everyone on here really shines. You have Teach Your Children in Our House, which have endured as wonderful singles by Graham Nash that you still hear in commercials, television shows to this day. Woodstock is their cover of the Joni Mitchell song, which they truly made their own. You have Deja Vu and Almost Cut My Hair from David Crosby. They're both excellent. 4 and 20, Stephen Stills' acoustic song is beautiful. Carry On, they brought that in. Stills and Young, I believe, brought that in for Buffalo Springfield. Everything on here. Helpless from Neil Young is excellent. Wonderful album. Deja Vu is my number 8. Number 7, this is probably the album I got into most recently from 1970 of the ones on this list. But I've still loved this album for 15 years. It's Dave Mason's Alone Together. Now, the most popular song on here, which was nearly a top 40 single, was Only You Know and I Know. But everything on here is excellent. A wide range of moods. Waiting on You is more rockin'. Shouldn't Have Took More Than You Gave is excellent. Wonderful. Wah wah guitar playing on that. World in Changes is very cerebral. Sad and Deep as You is a lot more tranquil. Look at You, Look at Me is very dramatic. Everything on here, wonderful. Album I don't think gets talked about enough. Dave Mason's Alone Together is my number 7. And as you probably know, Dave Mason was a member of Traffic. Well, I'll be talking about an album by them pretty shortly. But before that, let's talk about an album that I've had for over 40 years because I originally had this on cassette. The Heavy Metal Kid here, Black Sabbath Paranoid. Now, best known for War Pigs, Paranoid, and Iron Man. Paranoid and Iron Man, I've heard so many times. I don't need to hear them again. War Pigs, I can never, ever get sick of. But it's that second side of Deep Cuts that brings me back. Electric Funeral is excellent. Hand of Doom is very evil. Killer riffs on here. Rat Salad, that instrumental is excellent. And Fairies Wear Boots, which was later on Ozzy Osbourne's Speak of the Devil. That was actually where I first heard it because I bought that as a new release. Actually, I got it as a gift as a new release. Fairies Wear Boots is excellent. Whole album is killer. Planet Caravan, of course, was covered by Pantera, but everything on here, fantastic. Not my favorite Sabbath album, but it is one that I could still go back to, even though a lot of people say this is the overplayed album. I still think it's wonderful. Black Sabbath Paranoid is my number 6. Number 5, I mentioned Traffic. John Barleycorn Must Die. Now, first sign of this album, all over classic rock radio when I was young. Glad and Freedom Rider, one of the best 1-2s in classic rock history because they always played these songs together. Glad is an instrumental, very jazzy instrumental. Chris Wood is wonderful on this album, whether he's playing the sax or the flute. Empty Pages is a fantastic song. By this point, a lot of people were saying this was more of a showcase for Steve Winwood, but the rest of the guys in this band really stepped up. I mean, the whole is definitely greater than some of their parts on the best Traffic albums. Stranger to Himself is excellent. John Barleycorn, the traditional folk song, which was made more haunting, is awesome. Every Mother's Son is an excellent closer. Love this album so much. John Barleycorn Must Die by Traffic is my number 5. Number 4, this is an album I might have bought this in 1990 or so before the movie came out about this band Oliver Stone made. It's The Doors' Morrison Hotel. Now, this is my favorite album by The Doors. A lot of people would swear by the self-titled debut because it has a lot of hits on here. There wasn't really a hit on this album. This is the only album that didn't have a hit single, although you heard Roadhouse Blues all the time on AOR back in the day. And you would also hear Peace Frog into Blue Sunday played as a twofer. But this is a harder rocking album for The Doors. I think this just kills all the way through. Waiting for the Sun is awesome. You Make Me Real is very fast paced and kind of heavy. Ship of Fools is wonderful. Land Ho is awesome. On the second side, they get a little more blues, more jazz, and like with The Spy and Queen of Highway really has a jazz feel. Indian Summer is a wonderful ballad. Maggie McGill is a very kind of blues rock closer. My favorite album by The Doors, Morrison Hotel, their 5th album, is my number 4. Number 3 is appropriate because it's Led Zeppelin 3. This is my favorite Led Zeppelin album. This is the one I always go back to. House of the Holy is close. Of course, I love Led Zeppelin 2, Led Zeppelin 4. I got beat. I got beat up with those albums from hearing them so much, although I still adore them. I love when Led Zeppelin went acoustic. And I know there's heavy songs on here too, like Immigrant Song was a hit single for them. Out on the Tiles is really heavy, and Celebration Day is as well. But the acoustic stuff on here is to die for. Friends is wonderful. Gallows Pole, traditional song they made their own, is excellent. Love Tangerine, That's the Way, Bronny Stomp. Since I've Been Loving You that's more blues, but it's an excellent performance by Robert Plant. You know, some people don't like Hats Off to Roy Harper. It's kind of a throwaway as a closer, but the highs are all the other 9 tracks. I mean, they are fantastic. I have to rank this high. I love this album since I bought another one I probably bought when I was about 17 or 18. It's Led Zeppelin 3, and that's my number 3. Number 2, I also bought this album when probably went age 17 or 18. The first album I bought by this band. Now I have a ton of albums by them. This is not my favorite album by them, although I'm a little beat on it, but I like a few of the later albums more, meaning like albums like 3, 4, and 5. Santana, Abraxas. This was their second album. Now, this is best known for the hit single Black Magic Woman, Gypsy Queen, which was their biggest hit until Smooth came out in 1999. Oi Como Va was also a big hit. And they've been playing these songs back to back in concert forever. But everything on here is wonderful. Samba Pati is very elegant. Saya Cabo is very ferocious. Incident Neshabor is excellent. Singing Wid's Crying Beast is a very cool opener instrumental. Everything on here, excellent. Mother's Daughter, fantastic album. I've adored this album since 1989. Apraxis by Santana is my number 2. Number 1. Now, this artist has been around for almost 60 years. He started in them, and this was his second solo album. He's released a ton of them. And if this artist had an album that was like a greatest hits album, I would definitely say for Van Morrison, it would be Moondance. Interestingly about Moondance, Come Run was actually the hit single when this first came out. It was a top 40 hit. Moondance was bigger as a album track. And It Stoned Me was a single as well, but that didn't, I think that might chart in the 80s or 90s. So many classic songs, timeless songs on here. Into the Mystic is a beautiful track. I've had a few friends who use this as their wedding song. Caravan is excellent. Best, a lot of people know it for when Van Morrison did it on in The Last Waltz, the last concert by the original band. Glad Tidings, excellent closer. This ended a season of The Sopranos, which is excellent. And It Stoned Me, excellent closer. All these songs I'm talking about, you've heard before. The deep cuts are great. Brand New Day is wonderful. Everyone has this very rollicking feel to it. It's really cool. These Dreams of You is excellent. Everything on here, excellent. This and Astral Weeks, you can't go wrong with either one. Actually, this is the third album now I think about it. Astral Weeks would be the second album. Blowing Your Mind would be the debut. My number 1 from 1970. I do have this on cassette. I got it on cassette when I was a teenager. I have it on vinyl. My mom bought it for me for Christmas one year. Van Morrison, Moondance is my number 1. Honorables. I'm going to go on to my notepad now. As I said before, you're going to see even more glare in these glasses. So here we go. I have to say the Woodstock soundtrack. That is a classic. I love the movie. I love the soundtrack. It got me into bands like the next one I'm going to talk about. And it got me deeper into The Who and Sly and the Family Stone and so many other artists. Mountain Climbing. That was so close to my top 10. George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. I would probably have that a little higher, but I only bought that album a couple years ago, so I don't have as much experience with this as I have at my top 10. Miles Davis, Bitches Brew. I love that album. I've owned that album for 25 years. I actually have a 4-disc box set of it. I love that album. I don't go back to it too often. I actually like the albums that surround it a little bit more. The band Stage Fright, Derek and the Dominoes, Layla Assorted and Assorted Love Songs, Allman Brothers Band, Odd Wild South, James Gang, Rides Again, Deep Purple, In Rock, Black Sabbath, self-titled debut, Let Me Have a Drink. Joni Mitchell, Ladies of the Canyon, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Cosmos Factory. There's another album that plays like a greatest hits album. Syd Barrett, The Madcap Laughs. Love that album. Speaking of Van Morrison, his band in the Street Choir came out that year as well. Another excellent album. Christopherson, that was his debut. That is a fantastic album. Leon Russell's self-titled debut, another excellent album from that year. Canned Heat, Future Blues. That album was one that my one boss at Ollie's, Ron Zeke, told me to get, and I didn't get it until 20 years later, but he was right. And Alice Cooper's Easy Action. A lot of people don't like those first two albums by Alice Cooper, but I thought Easy Action was a great segue to all those other great albums they would do with the Alice Cooper band. It was just a little bit raw, but I mean, you saw the foundation, or you heard the foundation on Easy Action. So, what are your favorite albums from 1970? Do you like the albums that are in my top 10? Do you like my honorables more? Are there some albums that I should have talked about? Oh, Wishbone Ash's self-titled debut. That's another excellent album from 1970. Please let me know in the comments. Neil Young, After the Gold Rush, another great album from 1970. Again, please let me know in the comments what your favorites are from 1970. If there's some albums that you think should have been in here that I missed. Just to give you some programming notes for you, the Up to the Limit series on Accept continues on my friend John Clauser's channel, My Music Corner. At this moment, the Death Row episode is out, the one that we did with Reed Little. We will be doing the episode for Predator on November 14. That will be coming out, and our guest will be Jake, not from State Farm. Speaking of Jake, I will be on his channel called Jake, not from State Farm on November 11th as we talk about Megadeth's fourth album, their seminal release, Rust in Peace. November 14, I will be filming a show on Grant's Rock Warehouse, and it'll be part of our One and Done series. I don't know if that's going to be live or if that's going to be taped, but you know me, I love to give spoilers, so couple seconds, I'll show you the album. You may know that album that I just showed up from being on the Contrarians. I was part of a panel with the incomparable Nick Esquire as well as Tim Derling. We talked about that album 2 years ago. It was my topic on the Contrarians. That's how I remember it so well. So, those are your programming notes. Let me know what you think of the show, what you think of the albums. Until I see you again, have a fantastic weekend. Do what you love, and I'll talk to you soon.